I went down a very big dark rabbit hole and realized that health is not what we're sold. That there's a lot of people speaking with very loud voices that are giving really harmful advice and are making it more confusing. And I really believe that the fundamentals of health isn't actually that confusing. They're actually pretty simple, but simple doesn't always sell. You can tweak health to become, I hate the word, optimal. But basically, like, hardly anyone is getting there because we're missing the first step.
It's fundamental in everything, isn't it? I think, we'd like to think that something like nutrition is just about the food, but quite often it's about so much more.
So why am I doing all of this? Why am I trying to fight? Is it because I feel that I want to support my mental health? Is it because I want to feel strong? You're exhausted. Like, why would you do that?
Sarah Ann Macklin is a leader in nutrition and wellbeing. As the founder of the Be Well Collective and host of the acclaimed podcast Live Well, Be Well, she has spent years exploring what it truly means to live well through science, compassion, and personal experience. From her influential TED Talk and groundbreaking public health campaigns to shaping conversations in the European Parliament, Sarah's work continues to inspire change in the way we view both physical and mental health. Stay tuned as we dive into her journey, insights, and her mission to make science-driven well-being accessible to everyone. What's something that you once believed about wellness that you now see differently?
The one thing that I used to believe about wellness that I see differently,
Or it
I
could be
would
a few
say,
things.
yeah, well, there's quite a lot actually. I mean, I've changed my mind a lot in the last 10 years. I would say that two things. Well, I'd say a couple of things. One, that it's there's no correct formula, for sure. And I think we're sold that there are the specific formulas out there, and there's not one. And the second is, I think, restriction and kind of that hard plus hard equals success results. It's just not true at all. And I actually know that connecting more to my own body and thoughts and mind and how I speak to myself is one of the biggest levers. But yeah, I always was very hard on myself and felt that I was always falling behind and had to keep up with all the latest things. And actually, that made me less healthy. So probably that.
It sounds like that shifted over time for you. I know you started your career in the fashion industry and then went into nutrition. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that and how that influenced your relationship with wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was spotted as a model when I was 16. I came from like a town 2 hours outside of London near the seaside. So like it was very not the norm for that to happen, basically. I wasn't normally in those situations. And I, yeah, signed with a massive agency in London at 16 and then did a few things when I was still finishing my studies. And then my agent called me and he was like, look, I think you really have the potential to have a very big career. You've already shot some big campaigns. Or like, would you be willing to kind of come to London and go fully in? And my mum really wanted me to go to university, but our patch together was if you do really well in your A levels, then you can make the decision of what you want to do when you're 18. So the last exam, I basically called my agent. I was like, I'm coming to London. And in 4 days, I was in London and had this kind of whirlwind career. I lived in New York for many years. I lived in Paris, um, shot for some amazing brands, ones that, many people can only dream of. But that came with a lot of pressure. And rewinding, this isn't 3-4 years ago. This is going back 15-18 years ago now, where phones were just coming up. This is when people were more on Facebook and Instagram had just started. So it was like a whole different world. And all I remember was being in this kind of epicenter that was like on steroids of comparison. And no one on the outside, really, who wasn't in the industry, kind of understood that because it was just at the height of it. I was just surrounded by comparison all the time. Even the girls that I was living with, I was going up against them in jobs. So it was like a dog eat dog world. And we were never taught like how to eat healthy or how to look after our mental health. And then all of a sudden social media launched and it kind of added on to the complexity of it. But then I realized that how people felt on social media is how I felt all the time, surrounding myself with this like constant comparison, which actually isn't healthy when all of your self-worth is based on just solely what you look like. You can't really do much more than be on time and and be nice on set. It's basically, if you look good, then they're going to pick you. So that was all happening. I think Goop had just launched. That was like the first big wellness brand that I remember, and I was in America. And I think for me, I was like, well, the only way that I can improve is restriction on all of these things. So I've got to go to Barry's at 6 a.m. I've got to be having these green juices. I've got to do like all of these things to the most extreme because, if I'm an athlete standard, that's what you do. You tweak and you do all of these things to perfection. And it was really unhealthy. And I didn't realize actually that the one thing I was never checking in on was like, how was I feeling? How was my stress levels? How was my sleep? Like all the things that actually keep you regulated. I didn't even know what emotional regulation was back then. It just wasn't spoken about. Like mental health was just so far from a conversation. And and that landed me, with a body breaking down and, passing out on set and being in hospital for a very long time. And it made me realize, I was like, wow, I kind of have this like model diet, essentially. I mean, literally now, if you would have looked at my diet, it was probably too much on the smaller side, but I didn't have an eating disorder. I still had 3 good meals a day, really good protein, hardly any carbs, like that structure that we're told is really healthy. And I just put so much pressure on myself. And so the only thing I knew to do at that moment when I was at like the height of my career was to go back and learn about it. So I went back to school and I did a Bachelor of Science in Nutritional Science, and then my whole life changed. I went down a very big dark rabbit hole and realized that health is not what we're sold in marketing terms. It's a much more bigger conversation. I found out I was neurodivergent, which allowed me to understand myself so much more. I realized about fueling the brain and like how hungry the brain is and all of those things. And so it led me on my own journey. And I built a brand around it really to hopefully help other people.
That's such an incredible journey, and also the time that you're talking about. Like, I imagine not only just being immersed in that kind of, fashion industry world, which I can imagine is such a bubble,
Yeah.
but then at the same time to be, really quite young and away from your family and probably the people that you knew at that point in your life. And then, as you said, social media started to come in, and that's sort of where you look to for your
Mhm.
health and well-being advice, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Do you think,
Because,
how do you
well,
think social media helps or hinders people in terms of their health and well-being?
it's so interesting because like I have this kind of a split-edged sword with it really. For the reason that, the reason why I started what I started 10 years ago on a smaller level, and now it's built to the brand that I have now with the show and the podcast and everything. But, when I didn't have anywhere to turn. I remember going back to school and sitting around the table to all of my family and have to say they're really supportive, but this makes them sound unsupportive, which they're not. But I sat there and I said, I'm going to go and study nutritional science. And they were like, what the, what, why? Like, why would you do that? Um, and I had that moment where people just didn't know that that was even a thing. And that sounds so crazy to say it now, but you
Yeah.
have to like rewind ourselves to so long
Mhm.
ago. Like it wasn't a done thing. Like no one really spoke about it. And now I know it's very trendy and people really want to know about it. But when I was studying it, I was having people taking me out for dinner going, you're making the worst decision of your life. Because it was just so removed from social media. And I
Yep.
think that's what's really interesting. So now I look at social media and I have this like double-edged sword, which is why everything that I try to do is like based in ethics and based in, is this really going to help people or is this going to confuse people? Because the great thing, and I'll always start with the positive, is that there is more on offer now than ever before. Like people can feel more connected to talk about health. It's also become more of a community-based thing, which is amazing. You can find your tribes, whereas before maybe you were quite isolated because lots of your friends weren't into this. You can get more recipes online. People talk more about their personal stories and their journey. So like all of that is really positive, which 15 years ago wasn't around. People were too scared to talk about mental health or their journey with food or anything. So that's great. But then the flip side of it, which is where like I struggle and with navigation, is that there's a lot of people speaking with very loud voices that are giving really harmful advice and are making it more confusing. And I really believe that the fundamentals of health isn't actually that confusing. They're actually pretty simple, but simple
Mm.
doesn't always sell. And so what happens is there's this fight for a hierarchy of like, I've got the solution and I'm going to shout loud and I'm going to create really cool stuff to pull people in online. And then people feel so overwhelmed and so oversaturated, but they don't know where to turn. And that's the problem that I see when people come to see me in clinic, is that they're just like, well, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. And that problem, what we hit with that is that the people just give up because they're like, well, anything I seem to do doesn't work. And I do this. And then the next week I see someone else telling me the opposite advice. And so we're basically actually making it more confusing where, health, you can tweak health to become, I hate the word optimal, but basically like hardly anyone is getting there because we're missing the first step. And
Mm.
that's something that I think we need to come back to, is just the simplicity of health. And it shouldn't be hard and it shouldn't be extreme and it shouldn't feel negative. It should feel positive. It should feel something that you're connected to and you enjoy doing. And so we're, going to be an $8 trillion market by 2027. It's like one of the most, saturated money making markets now that there is out there.
Mm.
So you just have to be really careful that you're not being sold into marketing trends.
So important. When you're highlighting that idea around, like, it's just an overwhelm of information, isn't it? Like, can be contradictory. It can be just so much, and I think it's almost in parallel with what we talk about with social media, that we can have over connection, we can be overstimulated, but at the same time, we're not experience that genuine connection. And I think when we're thinking
Totally.
about nutrition and well-being, the same thing is true, that we're so busy trying to check all those checklists off that we're losing sight of the basics. And the
Yeah.
reality is we've known what the basics are for some time. But
Well, it's true. Like, I talk about the information diet in the sense that, like, we have to be really careful about how much we're actually consuming because we're really
Mm.
unaware of the amount of information that we're getting. I think it's something, and this isn't a specific stat, this has been thrown around online a lot, but we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And there's kind of a lot of conspiracy about, like, where does that stat come from? But there is some kind of underlining like truth to that we have a lot of
We definitely
information
have a
brought
lot of
into us
thinking. Yep.
constantly. And I think we have to be really aware of just how much we are consuming unconsciously. And I say to people when they come to the clinic, you know how to eat well. Like, you know how to eat well. I'm not gonna kind of make you feel that you don't know that. That's actually something you do know. What you're struggling with is the navigation of it. What you're struggling with is like putting in things to support you. And actually, I think when we think about where we want to be, the problem with that is that that's us on our best days. And we don't ever
Mhm.
talk about like when we're not on our best days. Like, okay, so set yourself up for when you're on your worst day, because that's how we should be looking at things, right? Like
I
when
love that
everything,
advice.
yeah, like when everything goes wrong, like
Yep.
what in those moments is going to be the most helpful? Because I think we
Mhm.
always look at anything in success with food, health, nutrition, anything of like, well, if I do all these things, well, that's you on your best day, which is just not what happens in life. So set
Mhm.
yourself up for the worst day and like make sure you've got those things in, because that's why willpower is such a big conversation. You don't not have willpower because you have willpower on the great days because it's easy, but you don't set yourself up for the hard stuff. And so I think that's where the fundamentals of general health has become really
Mhm.
blurred. We're setting ourselves up for this like optimal time, which isn't life. So that's
I
why we
think
all feel like we're
even that
failing.
language, isn't it? The optimal language is sort of like, when
Oh,
do we live in the optimal state? It's
never.
so true. I love that. So, what
Mm,
would you tell someone who is struggling with all of that? Because we're all on social media, whether we want to be or not, like, it's just part of everyone's everyday life. And I think
yeah.
that you can get overwhelmed with the information, and even if that information is credible. So, even if we're talking about in the best case scenario, where you have a bunch of credible sources, are following a number of people who are doing great things, but you are experiencing that overload. What can people do to get back to that simplicity that you're talking about?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is knowing that you have to have boundaries with yourself. So I think we talk a lot about boundaries with others, but we talk less about boundaries with ourselves. And it's very simple in the sense of how I also get people to approach their food. So it's thinking about with their phones, like your brain is addicted because it's dopamine hits. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to remember that your brain has so many different types of connections, but you're pulling one type of the front of your brain to this one thing, which is your phone. So all you're doing is you're then basically reducing all the connections from all the other things that are around you, becoming so hyper focused just on this one thing that is giving you this immediate feedback. So when you're thinking about your phone, I mean, there's a couple of ways. Put on do not disturb. Mine goes on in the morning and it comes off at midday, and I allow myself. You have to allow yourself that time to be on your phone. So similarly to when you'd want to go to the gym, put those time slots in your diary. I know that sounds really extreme, but if you're really struggling with reducing your connection to it, say like, okay, I'm going to look at it at 9, I'm going to look at it at 12, I'm going to look at it at 5. There's 3 times in the day that I'm going to use my phone to connect to social media, because I also know that I want to feel connected to what's going on. So you allow yourself that time to have that, but you don't allow it to consume you. And I think we're mindlessly consuming a lot of things without realizing it. So it's being really kind of mindful and putting it in to when you're allowed to kind of have that interaction, which is really important. I think a lot of us also are like not unconsciously unfollowing accounts that don't make us feel great. We might think that these
Mm-hmm.
accounts make us feel really good, but actually do they? Like it is like 100% of your feed making you feel good all the time? If it's not, then you have to do this conscious, like this consciously thing of unfollowing people or muting them, or even deleting Instagram for a week is a really healthy thing. And then putting it back on your phone, like giving yourself the space and the time.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly to when we have like our work weeks, we don't work 7 days a week. We have 5 days on and 2 days off. And so we should be thinking about, how much we're consuming online should be really similar. Because if you're not looking on Instagram, you might be looking on LinkedIn. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you could be looking on X. If you're not looking on X, you could be looking on Substack. If you're not looking at Substack, you could be looking at the news. And so it's like this constant like consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just this thing of being mindful, and something that really helps me is just getting up and going for walks and leaving my phone at home, because I have no connection to be able to pick it up. Like physically taking my card and my keys and leaving the house and leaving my phone at home. And my niece taught me that when we were in this summer with my parents, and she turned to my dad and said, "Granddad, I'm going to leave my phone at home." And she's 13. And he was like, "Why? Like, why are we going to leave your phone at home?" And she was like, "Because I just need time away from it." And I'm like, do you know what? It's the simplicity of just putting in your own boundaries for yourself and leaving it at home. So I think it's just creating a lot of like mindfulness around your interaction with it, self-awareness. And when you
Mm-hmm.
do, you'll create space. Your mind will feel more connected to looking up, seeing the trees. Because I imagine anyone listening to this now, after listening to this, just go outside and just sit for 5 minutes and see how many people are walking past you on their phones. Like, it's just
So
even that
important. Yeah.
simple awareness. There's so many people you'll see just sit there for 5 minutes and just count. And I imagine over 60% of people will be like this on their phones. So,
I always think of when I went to Bali before we had smartphones, and then post. And when you walk down the street, like you get a lot of interaction in Bali, like people obviously trying to sell you stuff. But I remember the first time going after smartphones, and there was just silence on the street. And it was the weirdest thing, like just to notice that really clear difference and how engaged we all are on our
yeah.
phones. You're right. It's so important to step away from it, because I think it also allows us that space to connect with what it is that we really want. What
Mhm.
do we want to do? What do we want to eat? How do we want to connect with the world? So important. I've also heard you talk about the idea that wellness can become performative. Can you explain what you mean by that and what impact that can have on people?
Yeah, I think there's so much around health and well-being, and it's interesting because I actually don't like the word wellness, because I feel like the word wellness is a trend and a fad. I feel like that only
Yeah.
started like 10 years ago, like the
I
whole
agree
wellness
with you.
industry.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's hard because I don't want to demonize the wellness industry, because again, it's given us this amazing like connection to health. But for me,
Mhm.
as a scientist, as someone who feels very kind of who was taken off that path from the wrong wellness advice, I connect and I feel very protective over it for that reason. I connect a lot more to the term well-being.
Absolutely. Me
And
too.
for me, like a person that's well and being feels like
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that we want to be connecting to health. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
wellness, it does just feel like wellness. It feels like anyone can kind of jump on, give you advice, say like, I did this, and then 3 weeks later I felt this, and that's the answer. And it's like, well, actually, there's so much complexity to health. It is so complex. And I think the more that you start to analyze and understand it, the more you realize you don't know. And that's why I think the people that like speak the loudest are the ones who normally know the least because they're shouting from their rooftops. And I always remember hearing a conversation with my professor and saying, a really good scientist always wants to prove their hypothesis wrong. That's what they're
Mm-hmm.
setting out to do. They have this question in their mind and they're going to try and do everything in their research to prove it wrong. And if you can't prove it wrong, it shows that it's right. And I think that's something that we've lost with health is that we think, okay, well, this one thing has worked, and now I'm going to tell everyone that that's the answer. And I think we have to be very careful about how we are relaying health information because if people try it and they don't see the same results, or they have some health issues that stop them having the same results that person did, it puts them into a lot of shame. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
disconnects them from wanting to try again. They feel quite lost. They get to that overwhelming sense. And so I think we have to be really aware of like what we are consuming online as people on their best days. A lot of advice that we are consuming online now is marketing. And marketing is meant to do one thing. It's meant to get that click to buy a product or to, connect to that brand. And I think we have to really kind of come back to ourselves and say, like, actually, it's great that I can consume all of this, but now I have to create my own formula that's right for me. And I feel like that's where we've kind of got a bit of a disconnect. Especially with women, there's less speak and, talking about women's health.
Mm-hmm.
There's less women talking about it as well because, it's much more male dominated in this field. I know that just from like how many people I interview. I would love to have more of a higher rate of women on the show, but we just don't have as many as men. And so I think we have to be really aware of like the language that we're using, like how we are relaying health information, all of that stuff. So I think it's just having a bit of a filter and awareness on it because I think it's only going to get louder. That's the thing.
It is. And it's so important, I think, to understand that difference between someone who has been trained in a particular profession, like yourself, who's been trained in nutrition, versus someone who has gone through their own personal journey and had an experience of something working for them. And
Hmm.
it's not to say that those messages aren't important because they are, because sometimes it is that
I'm
feeling, that
sure.
sense of, oh, this person has gone through the same thing as me. And we need that in our lives, right? We need to connect in that way. But I think it's about how we use that information that needs to be better understood. That yes, take that person as inspiration and connect with them and their story, but be very clear that that doesn't mean that what worked for them will work for you. And when a health professional is talking, they're usually highlighting those things. They're usually highlighting, hey, for some people this works, for other people this won't. Because we know
Hmm.
that. We know that there is no one size fits all solution for every human. And I know, I'm sure that, similarly to when I'm working with someone in therapy, that the way I work is very different with each person because it's based on
Yeah.
their unique needs. And
Yeah.
similarly, I'm sure you're having the same experience when you're sitting with someone one on one, that, what you're talking about, the way you're communicating the information and what they
Hmm.
need is very different.
Yeah, totally. I think storytelling is such a big part of our health behaviors because that's why I say everyone knows how to eat healthy. There's just a block because we're kind of not connecting to the emotional side. So I think
Mhm.
storytelling has such a big place. I think it's also really important for people to share their journeys because also it allows other people to feel seen. And so I think for so long, we haven't had that connection to feeling seen or we're like, God, it's just me, so
Mhm.
I don't want to talk about it. And I know I've had that personally, and I think that's something that's really helped me on the show where I've listened to, over 400 people speak about their journey and their profession and their area. And I'm like, wow, I really see myself in that. Or wow, somebody writes to me and says, Sarah, I really connected with what you said. So you have this amazing rapport where you feel seen and that makes you want to explore it more. I think you just have
Mhm.
to also, you know, connect that to the ethical side of we don't want people to be taking harmful advice or too many supplements or too many extremes and thinking that that's the only answer. So I think it's a really fine balance. But I think the storytelling component is so fundamental. I think the most important thing for health for me is allowing that person to feel seen and accepted. Is really, really essential in anyone's health journey. Because if they don't, then that's when, people become very resistant to it. So the emotional element, that as a therapist is
Absolutely.
fundamental.
It's fundamental in everything, isn't it? I think,
Yeah,
we like to think that something like nutrition is just about the food, but quite often it's about so much more. And so that's where, as you said, like sort of connecting with yourself becomes so important and understanding who you are and the way that you operate.
totally. Yeah, I talk a lot about being in our minds and not in our bodies. And so I think, when it comes to anything in health, especially food, like we have to connect back to our bodies, like how we're feeling, like our hunger signals,
Mhm.
all these different things that our body is trying to signal to us. It's stuff like going back to our earlier conversation about the phones, it pulls us out of our bodies. There's so many things now where we don't want to be in our bodies, that we need to be more in our minds, and school teaches us that so well. So it's about, getting back to feeling and hearing our own signals, our bodily signals, what
Mhm.
are they trying to tell us? And feeling comfortable with that, because we're never taught to understand them. And so for a lot of people, it can feel really isolating and a bit weird and a bit like, well, I feel really comfortable in this. I don't quite want to sit here. But I've got 25 things that are going to distract me. And so obviously the easier option is to jump into the distraction. And so a lot of the stuff that I try to do is to get people like back into like feeling comfortable in the unknown of what their body's trying to tell them, and get them to try and listen to it a lot more.
Mhm.
Because fundamentally, like, what you need. We just need to like try and allow ourselves to understand that information.
Absolutely, and to tune out all the noise and all the things that we should be doing and to really connect with ourselves. What's the
Yeah.
starting point for someone who is feeling overwhelmed by all of the noise and all of the things that they think they should be doing and, the nutrition supplements they should be taking or the diet they should be pursuing? What's a good starting point for them, do you think?
I think if you're feeling really overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. I'd say like one of the top things is writing down why you're on this journey. Like writing down what you want your outcome to be, not what you think it should be, but like, okay, so why am I doing all of this? Why am I trying to fight? Is it because I feel that I want to support my mental health? Is it because I want to feel strong? Is it because I know that health, diet, nutrition, all of those things are actually really important, and it's something that I am really interested in and would like to learn more about? Like, what is it? Why are you wanting to do that? Why is really important, because otherwise you're kind of getting lost down this road and you're like, well, I don't quite know where I'm going, but I'm on this journey. It's like getting in a car and not knowing where you're going. So like writing down the actual why, and that sometimes can take a while. Like you might sit there for a couple of days just journaling, being like, actually, the reason why I want to do this is because I actually care about my health, and
Mhm.
I want to be able to live a long, good quality life. It doesn't have to be the longest life. I don't want to have this longevity protocol, but I want to know that when I'm, 60, I can still enjoy walks without extreme amounts of pain. Like that's really important to me. So actually, that's my why. So finding out why you want to do this is important. The second thing I would say, like before you start taking supplements and going down the roads of buying everything online, because it sounds like the magic bullet, simply just go to your GP. And in the UK, we're very
Mhm.
lucky that it's free healthcare. But wherever you are in the world, go to a doctor and just say, look, can I just get some blood tests? I just want to see. And the really important ones are like your vitamin D, your B12s, your iron, your red blood cell count, all of that. Just saying, look, and it doesn't have to be this really intense biomarker blood test. We just need like the fundamentals. We need to know if you're low in B12. We need to know if you're iron deficient. We need to know if you're vitamin D deficient, because all of these things play a massive role. And you might be not be deficient, and you might be extremely deficient and not know. And so then you might need a higher type of supplement if you are very deficient. So like just getting, and so in the UK that would be free. And I know in other parts it's not, but I think it shouldn't be an expensive test. So just getting that done and gives you kind of the baseline. You're like, okay, well actually I am deficient in a few things or I'm not. So what I'm going to do now is potentially look at my why and say, okay, I can supplement with these supplements because I know that I'm deficient in X, Y, Z, or maybe I don't need a supplement. And the next thing I would say is looking at like the general lifestyle stuff. How much sleep are you getting? How much movement and exercise are you getting? And how much light are you getting in the day? Because all of those things as well are going to be playing into the wider fundamentals of health. So if you're not getting up outside in the morning, 90% of us spend, no, most of us spend 90% of our time indoors, which means that we're not regulating that sleep hormone. So getting up, getting outside, doing things in your day to help support you to make those healthy decisions. Because a lot of us, as I said originally, know the kind of first steps to be healthy, but we're not supporting ourselves in other areas. So allowing ourselves to have a good night's sleep, it's really important, because what that does is when you don't sleep well, when you wake up tired, you have a hunger hormone called ghrelin, and I call it a gremlin because it's like a little gremlin
I
that
love
like
that.
comes out.
I've had that little
And
gremlin before.
Yeah, exactly.
Sleep
And
deprived mum.
yeah, the
It's
mums know
definitely a
it the
big gremlin.
most.
Yes, I think
The
so.
mums know it the most. The gremlin's always around when you're a mum.
Yeah.
And so it's about like going, okay, well, if I haven't slept well, the hunger hormone comes out, and it's like I need more energy constantly. So sleep is really important. And that's not to say having bad night's sleep is going to ruin everything, but it's just having the awareness and knowing that actually when I do have more bad night's sleep, I'm going to be more hungry. So what am I going to do? I know at the beginning of the week, I'm going to make sure that I make healthy breakfasts, because I know I'm going to be exhausted. So I'm going to make really good breakfasts that have high amounts of protein, good complex carbohydrates, lots of nuts and seeds, all the things that actually just make it a little bit easier, because I know that I'm going to need more fueling and supporting myself. So it's like really breaking it down to like kind of the fundamentals in that area. Okay, well, I haven't slept well, so I'm not going to go and do a really intense workout, because my body doesn't need that right now. What my body needs is to walk and to move and to mobilize. And so allowing yourself to connect to where you are is really important. Not doing something because you think you should. That's not what our lifestyle is. Doing something where you are and supporting your needs where you are. And you have to think about your health and your diet in moments that are constantly moving. So, there's going to be areas of your life where you're going to have more need in one area than others. And so sometimes, like thinking about being a mum, okay, well, do you know what? Connection's really important for our health. We know that. But actually, that's going to fall maybe a little bit when you're a mum, because you're not going to have the same social life that you maybe did before you were a mum. So, like, for the moment, we're going to like just let that drop a little bit. And I'm going to focus more on my needs on getting good movement, making sure I'm drinking enough water, like doing all these other things that you can do right now. And then allowing that when you've got that more time, maybe when your kids go to school, this is when actually that part kind of comes back into play again. So it's allowing it to feel a lot more flexible in your needs, and not feeling that you have to keep all of that together 100% all the time, because that is not healthy. And what that does is it makes you more stressed that you're not doing these things. And then guess what? When you're stressed, your cortisol's high. And when your cortisol's high, guess what? That increases inflammation. And guess what? Like the base of every chronic disease is inflammation. So like if you can just know that, actually I'm not going to stress out about all these things, because it's kind of doing the opposite of what I'm wanting to do. It's like a really good reminder that when you feel that, oh, I really want to do all these things but I can't, stressing yourself out, it's just not going to help. So it's giving yourself a bit of like a breather, a bit of a kind of pat on the back from a friend, and knowing that it has to be flexible.
I think that's such an important message, because I think so much of the wellness messaging is around rigidity, actually. Just thinking about it as you're talking, it is about you must do it this way and you need to kind of like push through. So, go to the fast cycle class, do the run, like go, go, go. Eat less, do more, like just kind of that go, go, go mentality, which is actually, we know, puts a lot of stress on our body. And I think what you're talking about there in terms of just being kind to yourself, having that self-compassion, and also recognizing that your needs do change. So you're better off in that moment if you haven't had a great night's sleep. Just give yourself a break and recognize that what your body actually needs is rest. And it's okay if you go do that 5K run that you'd planned, or you don't get to the gym, but as you said, you just get out and you do a nice walk and you sit in the sun and you allow yourself to feel that sun on your skin. I think that is such underrated advice, really. It's just that tuning into your body and having that flexibility to adapt to your changing needs rather than some pre-planned idea that you have around what wellness should look like or what well-being is for you.
100%. I always talk a lot about, and it's really simple, but it's thinking about, and sometimes I connect to a child, but sometimes in this moment it might be to a best friend or somebody like your sister
Mm,
or someone who you care about. Imagine sharing a room with them and imagine them having a really bad night's sleep, waking up exhausted and berating themselves because they're like, well, I got to fast and I've got to go and do this training regime. And you're kind of looking at them and you're like, you're exhausted. Like, why would you do that? And it's interesting how we can have that understanding. Like, that's what I mean. We all know. We have this wisdom in us. We all know, but we can't connect it to ourselves sometimes in those moments because we're like, well, no, I've got to be doing these things because that's what I feel from social conditioning that I should be doing. And actually, one of the smartest and wisest things you can do in that moment is like wake up and be like, what advice would I say to that person right now? Like, what would I say? Genuinely, if I was sharing a room with that person and watching this happen, what would I say? And then you kind of flip it and say, well, what should I be saying to myself? Maybe that's going to make me feel like I'm not good enough and like I should be doing more. But actually, that's the advice that I would give to someone else. So surely I should take it. I don't know if you ever voice note your friends or when you give friends advice. Sometimes I give my friends advice and then I go, I really should be taking this advice myself. I kind of know all this advice. Yet for some reason I don't do it. And so I sometimes think that those moments are really helpful to kind of allow us to connect to what the right decision for us is.
absolutely. I think unfortunately it's so much easier for us to be compassionate towards others than it is towards ourselves. I think it's a great starting point if you're struggling with that self-compassion is just thinking about a friend and what you'd say to them.
Yeah. It's simple, but it's effective.
Oh, but that's the thing, the simplest things are the most effective, and they're
Hmm.
actually the things that help us the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
And they're free.
overcomplicate it, and they're free. What's one myth or message in the wellness industry that you'd like to dispel?
One myth in the wellness industry. I would say, oh gosh, there's so much. I think, I think, I think there's so many. I mean, I could go through 12 supplements that I think are myths. I could go through sleep, which I feel like is a myth. I think saying that you have to have 8 hours sleep every night to be optimal and performative just isn't reality. Um, again, we're like all super unique. And I do believe that sleep is the foundation as well of health. It's a really good starting point. But I think as soon as you start telling people you have to have 8 hours sleep to have a productive day, you're already people are like, well, I failed. They like wake up and they're like, well, do you know what? Actually, it's not great, especially for women going through menopause who aren't sleeping very well, or women that have newborn babies, or maybe you're a very anxious person and you're not sleeping very well. All of these things already stop us. And so I think the myths that I'm talking about are the things where if you have this one situation, it equals Y. And actually, like, that's a very large observation. That doesn't mean that it's true. And so I think there are some times when actually I've slept 5 hours and had a really good day. And there's other times when I've slept 5 hours and had a really bad day. There's sometimes when I've slept 8 hours and still woken up exhausted. And so I think there's a lot of context to these. If you do X, that equals Y. I think it's like a general conversation. And I see it a lot. You know, you go on to Twitter and it's like, here's the 5 things you should do to equal X. And you're like, it's not that simple. And the problem that I see is that it blocks people from starting because if you've already woken up and you're feeling, well, that was crap. I had a night's sleep that didn't go to plan and you're frustrated, then already you're feeling like you're going to give up. And so I think that that's a really important conversation to have and to say out loud and online, like, okay, well, actually, there was some days when I slept less and I had a really productive day. So I think there's a lot of those types of things that I'm just seeing because it's very clickbaity. If you do these 3 things, this will happen.
And
If you
also
do,
because it's also a bit of the, if you buy this thing or you can optimize this in this way. I absolutely
Mhm.
agree. I think it is also, I think, as a health professional, I'm sure you've found this as well, that it is a struggle sometimes putting information out there because you want to put so much nuance in everything and you can't. And so it is really important, even if you are taking advice from someone that you highly respect, that you know is a good source of information, that you need to put that into your individual context because everything is contextual. Everything is putting it through your own filter and bringing it back to what sits well with me, what works well with me. And I think that that is so fundamental when you're taking in information like that.
yeah, I think self-trust is the core of health. I think, like, trusting yourself and, I do believe in, experiment, see what works for you, but be aware, like, go, "Actually, okay, I'm gonna take magnesium because I believe that it's gonna help with my sleep." Great. 70% of that's deficient in magnesium. It's not gonna harm you. You're not taking, like, really high levels of something that's gonna cause harm. So try it. Try it, see what happens. Be observant. Don't try 25 things at once because you're not gonna know which one's working. So I think that's really important. Like, if you're gonna go into these things, start small, start on a small dosage, see what happens, see how you feel, and if you don't feel great, then stop and see if it makes a difference. Sometimes I think that when many of us want to make changes, we try and make them all at once. And what
Mm,
happens with that is that one, we just get, God, this feels a lot, and I can't maintain this level of output. Two, we're like, I don't know what's working. A lot of people will say, well, I started taking creatine and these 10 things happened to me. It's like, well, is it the creatine or is it other things that you're doing? I think that's the thing with getting advice online. Whereas if you're sitting down with a practitioner, you can go through all of the things that's been happening in your day and you can, like, really try and build a proper picture. And it's really similar, like, to mental health. Someone could say, oh, well, I did that and it didn't work. And you might sit down with someone and say, well, what else happened in your day? And actually, it was like two other events that they were completely unconscious by that spun them out. And that's why they felt the way they did. We have a very, like, narrowed vision,
mhm.
because we have a negativity bias. So it's really easy to point our fingers and say, well, it's that one thing that's why it happened. But we don't know if it is. So I think anything that we do and make changes, we have to do really slowly and we have to be really mindful of those things and just have check-ins throughout the day. Um, but I do believe that there's not, like, one magic pill or solution that's gonna make you feel better. Like, if you wanna take magnesium to help you sleep, brilliant. Doesn't mean that you're gonna have a 10 out of 10 sleep every night. So it's all of these, like, nuances into the conversation I think that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. And finding what works for you.
Mhm.
I want to ask you one last question. If you had a magic wand and you could impart one skill or piece of knowledge on every human, what would it be?
Oh, I like that question. I would say, um, I mean, it's something that is I've had to, like, work on a lot, but it's about it would have to be self-compassion. I mean, that's where a lot of my work now centers at with health. So if I could have a little magic wand, I could go around and touch everyone, I would touch them with more self-compassion and allow them to feel that they can connect themselves without judgment. Because when you do, and this has helped me personally and a lot of my clients, when you do connect to that part, it actually increases your motivation to change way better because you make way more rational
Absolutely.
decisions. You're not making reactive decisions. So you're kind of going, okay, well, that wasn't great, or well, I didn't go to plan. And you're kind of dealing with it head on, which is tough, but you're not dealing with it with this, I'm so stupid. I'm such a loser. Why did I do that? So angry at myself. Like, you're taking accountability for what you've done, but then you're going to make a compassionate change so it happens differently next time. And so I think when we can see more what's going on upstream, because there's always something that's going on upstream, and we can have that with a compassionate lens, then we're actually going to make better decisions for us. And so if I could do that for everyone and give them a bit more compassion, I think we'd be in a better place.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. It has been great chatting with you. You're such a wealth of knowledge and I've really
Mm.
appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Subscribe for more conversations filled with new insights, inspiration, and practical tools to create a life you love.